we're already having technical difficulties. So I want to welcome everybody to the new General Assembly building and our subcommittee from House General Laws. We are the ABC and Gaming Subcommittee. And my name is Paul Krizek. I'm your chairman, and we have a very esteemed committee, as you can see here, with the chairman of Appropriations to my right, the former chairman of Appropriations to my left. And so this is a very, this committee takes these bills very, very seriously, and we work very hard to make them the best and the most publicly. We try to keep the public aware, but we're really worried about the public safety, and that's what we really try to impress upon everybody that's coming up with your bills. So when you come before us, we recognize that there'll be some very controversial issues, but we want you to be respectful. I will be following parliamentary procedure, and we won't be allowing any kind of signage or anything like that. I know this group today looks pretty calm, but we will get other days when it's not so calm. And I will try to keep to the agenda, and we will not, for the members that are coming with bills, we're just going to try to handle those bills that are in the same category. So we'll try to do some. When we have ABC bills, we'll do a day where we have ABC. We'll do a day when we have gaming, and we'll do a day with cannabis. I think those are mainly the three big issues. And then there'll be, obviously, we will have some days where we have a bit of a mix. Today we have two bills on the agenda. And, oh, yeah.
You want your presentations first?
No, we're going to, let me just say, we're changing the agenda already because the chairman here he has a very important meeting he has to get up to. So we're going to start with the bills, if you don't mind. And do I need to have a roll call? Let's do roll call. Please indicate with the green button. We have a quorum, and everybody is here. Thank you all for attending. So the first bill that we're going to present is well. First, we have some housekeeping. Actually, Delegate Knight has a motion.
Mr. Chairman, with concurrence of the patron on House Bill 307, Delegate Ballard, he said that he has some more information forthcoming and probably would like to have an amendment to downsize his bill. He can have it done, he's pretty sure, by our next meeting where we hear these laws. So with his concurrence and hopefully yours and the committees, I would ask for bye for the day.
Okay, so this bill is not completely distilled yet, apparently. No, we'll keep the comedy down to a minimum. So, so we have a motion for the bill to go by for the day. Second, thank you very much. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Okay, the nay, the ayes have it. The bill is going by for the day. We'll hear it at our next meeting if possible. So the next bill that we have is HB 195. That's Delegate Martinez. If you will come to the podium. We have I understand we have a substitute, an amended substitute.
Yes.
Can council please tell us what that says and what that does?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. The substitute should be available on LIS. It just removes the code section dealing with sports betting from the bill, section 58.1-4042.1.
Thank you, council. And let me just say, I want to thank council and the clerk and for all their hard work, because this is a really busy committee, and there's been a lot of work done behind the scenes to get prepared for these meetings, and I appreciate all the work that you've done. So thank you very much. All right, Delegate Martinez, tell us about your bill.
Mr. Chairman of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to present the bill. But on a side note, I want to thank you for being the first committee this delegate has ever been in front of asking for the bill passage. So thank you.
We'll take it easy on you.
The bill qualifies that individuals and or businesses with a permit for gambling do not qualify as a casino under the penalty of a fine between $25,000 to $50,000. And the problem is that private individuals and businesses are using the term casino to describe their actions, and additionally, not applying for a permit. The solution is HB 195 imposes a fine for this activity.
Thank you. Do we have any questions for the patron? Delegate Knight.
Mr. Chairman, it may be for our attorney or the delegate. I read your original bill. Could you tell me what the substitute did that's different from the original bill, or if you want to defer to the attorney, that's your choice.
I would like to defer that question to Amy to come up and talk. She was.
Well, I mean, Ashley.
Can we have, I'd like counsel. Ashley, could you tell us what the amendment does? Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Delegate Knight, the original bill had a provision in it that would prohibit sports betting permittees from also using the phrasing casino in their naming conventions or advertising. And it is, we removed that provision from the bill. So now sports betting permit holders are not prohibited from using casino, the word casino. And
Does that help?
Mr. Chairman, so does that mean that casino can't be used in any format with any gaming except sports betting gets an exception?
That's correct, as it is written. Do we have any questions from the audience? Anybody? Those who are in support, maybe come up, and then those that are against it, we can come up afterwards.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, members of the committee. B. Gonzalez, representing DraftKings Sportsbook and Casino. That's our national name. We've been regulated by the Commonwealth for a few years. That is in our name. We do not use the word casino in our advertising here in Virginia, but that's part of the national name because we do offer iGaming in other states. iGaming is a legal regulated form of online wagering. That is not in Virginia. That's a topic that we'll be discussing over the spring and summer with you all at the commission, but it affects one company in the sports betting regulated market here in Virginia. So we asked for the amendment and it was agreed to by the patron and the chair, and we hope you support the substitute. I think the intent of the bill is to get at locations. I don't think there's any, our consumers that go on the app know that there's nothing on our app in Virginia that even remotely resembles casino wagering. So that was the intent of the amendment. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. So it's really a consumer protection bill for the physical locations. Do we have any other discussion? Any other questions? Do I have a motion? Delegate Knight.
Ashley, you're the attorney and not me and everything, and I totally understand what she's saying. And, you know, as far as taking it out for all of sports betting, would it be better to have an amendment in there that said a trademarked name? Because I assume they have a trademarked name. You know, if it's in their trademark name, and then that's the only exception. And if everything else, you know, would do what the delegate wants, takes casino out, would that add more clarity to it and be more narrow in scope?
Mr. Chairman, Delegate Knight, that's certainly a possibility. I don't know how far the naming issue goes with this specific case with DraftKings. It could be crafted more narrowly, that's a mouthful, to make sure that they are not caught up in this amendment.
Madam.
That's more of a policy decision than a legal call.
Mr. Chairman.
Let's let it go now. If we have to, we'll look at this before we go to full committee and general laws. I see the chairman in the audience. If he gives me the high sign, he's giving me the maybe sign. But we have two options, really, committee. We could try to narrow it down right now and make this change, and then if that's problematic, we can deal with that at general laws full committee. Or we can pass it as amended right now And then if it needs to be narrowed, we can try to do that at full committee. And the third option would be we could go by for the day, but the problem is we're going to, as Mr. Chairman said at the beginning of the general laws meeting, we're going to have a lot of bills. But that is a third option, certainly. So let me look at the committee and see what.
Have a motion.
Okay, question from Delegate Leftwich.
So just regardless of what we do with the bill today, I just wanted to maybe make a comment about narrowing it down, and that is, I think as the bill is drafted, someone could create a trade name and actually use the trade name in an advertisement to kind of circumvent the idea of not using casino anywhere. So some thought should be given to, when we narrow it, to limiting it to a corporate name registered with the State Corporation Commission. That's the only place it can appear, so people don't create a trade name just for advertising purposes.
Okay, I think after listening to Delegate Leftwich, I think now the best option is option 3. We'll go by for the day. So do I have a motion to go by for the day?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion, Delegate Price, second from Delegate Bennett Parker. All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
We don't need a roll call vote on this, do we? No. Okay, voice vote. So the ayes have it. We're going to go by for the day. We'll work on this. It just takes a couple tweaks, but I think we've got 2 presentations. I think it's important to hear from them. Thank you, Delegate Martinez.
Thank you, Mr.
You did a
Chairman.
great job
Committee.
for your first bill. And the easy ones are always the hardest. Okay, so first we've got on the presentation list, let me just tell you who we've got before we start. We've got Chief Kirby, the interim CEO of Virginia Alcoholic Beverage Control Authority, and then after that, we're going to hear from Ann Rogers, the coordinator for problem gambling prevention from the Department of Behavioral Health and Developmental Services. I want to apologize at front to ABC because I had asked them to come up with this big presentation, and they started working on it, but then I changed my mind, and what we're going to do is we're just going to, the committee's going to ask questions and try to and talk to them about different issues, especially around gaming, which is not their normal purview, but it is something that they, as you'll see once we start asking questions, what that entails. So I would like to hear from Chief Kirby and the ABC Authority, please. Or maybe we'll hear from John Daniels. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, members of the subcommittee, John Daniel with Virginia ABC. Chief Kirby, I understand, is on his way, but
Okay.
I'm happy to help you move things along if I
John,
can.
why not, is Ann here? We could start with her presentation if she's available. There she is. Come, is that okay with you, John?
That's perfectly fine.
Yeah. All right,
Whatever
come
the
on up, Ann.
subcommittee desires.
All right, sorry. I appreciate it. There's some extra copies of her presentation there at the little table, if anybody would like them. And thank you, Ann, for being so accommodating and ready to jump in. And tell us about what you've been doing, and I think it's exciting, and a lot of us in the General Assembly need to hear this. And I know that I have gone to your first 2 meetings, and I've learned a lot, and I really appreciate the hard work that you're doing. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm Ann Rogers, and I work with the Department of Behavioral Health Developmental Services. I'm the Problem Gambling Prevention Coordinator. And I also work with treatment and recovery services as well. So this was passed out to the committee members, And just to give you a little bit of information onto what we've been doing, how we've been spending the funds, that might be helpful for you in this coming session. So in prevention, over the past couple years, what we've done is we've done a large, broad assessment all across the state of Virginia, from corner to corner, coast to the mountains, et cetera. We've looked at behavior, knowledge, what the capacity is of the CSBs, community service boards, and looked at what people saw and heard in the environment that they lived and in their electronic communications. We've done some capacity building with the community service boards, as well as other providers and general public on what gambling is, because a lot of people don't understand what gambling is. They don't realize that bingo is gambling. They don't realize that playing the lottery is gambling. They only tend to think of playing poker or sports betting or cards. And if you were to ask a question, a broad question across the state, what is gambling? Or do you gamble? Many people would say no, but if you broke it down by every single, piece, every type of gambling, you'd find out the numbers are a lot higher. So we did some education around that. We did some education on what problem gambling is, that it's on a continuum. You can have it really badly, or you can have the initial phases of problem gambling. We did a lot of planning with the community service boards, and they've done a lot of implementation. Implementation such as educating merchants, educating youth, schools, the general public. They've done information dissemination to get out signs, the helpline information, the tip line information for the state police, and more signage on, again, education, recognizing the signs and symptoms of problem gambling. And then they've started working on some policy change, trying to work with, at the time when skill games were allowed, they were working with merchants to try to change the way how some of both the lottery and those skill games advertising was displayed across there, asking them to not have people under the age of 21 being allowed to play those skill games. So they started working with merchants to try to get that information across and get them to change their own internal policies. They've worked with schools on school events, because some school events were having like casino nights and things like that, trying to get them to change their practices and policies around that, and using non-gambling methods or fundraising, et cetera. As far as in treatment, when we started with gambling in the state, back in 2020, 2021, there were 6 certified and trained treatment providers across the entire state. That's it. But as of a month ago, there were 81 certified and trained providers. That has happened through a contract that we have with VCU. There's been 527 people screened. 332 were referred to treatment services. We've paid for, everybody who's gambled and put money into the Problem Gambling Fund, has paid for 297 assessments. They've done more assessments than that, but they've paid for 297 people to be assessed and treated, plus their own full-time staff have done more assessments on top of that. For recovery services, there were 0 back in 2021. There are 17 in 2023 within the network. There's 228 that have been referred to recovery services. And we've paid for over 181 peer services out in the public. There's also a couple full-time peer recovery specialists within VCU, and they've done additional peer recovery services on top of that. When we've looked at what some of the things that people are calling into the helpline for, the top 3 things in the earlier quarter, the first quarter of this fiscal year, were due to casino slots, internet sports betting, and the skill slot machine games. On the opposite side, one of the things that came across in the last legislation was to create this Problem Gambling Treatment and Support Advisory Committee. The purpose of the committee was to enable collaboration among prevention and treatment providers and operators of legal gaming in the Commonwealth of Virginia. It's on efforts to reduce the negative effects of problem gambling. This was, again, it was enacted in 2023. It became effective in July 2023. And because DBHDS is so proactive in things, we actually had our very first meeting in July. We didn't wait till July to form this committee. We had that first meeting. The first meeting really was about people getting to know each other, ideas and the vision. It's made up of committee members across both operators and the agencies, as well as the Community Service Board and the Virginia Council on Problem Gambling. We did introductions of members, we set policies and standing agenda items. We had the second meeting in October 18, 2023, and we had someone from the recovery community present. Then we had presentations by each member so that everybody could try to get to know what responsible gambling opportunities are they offering in these different venues. And then the third meeting, which is in a week, we'll be working on mapping of services so that in order to work together, we need to know where things are, where things aren't. And we're going to review the legislation, all those many, many bills that were just discussed earlier. And that's the end of my presentation. If anybody has any questions.
Thank you, Ann, very much. And I really, as I said, I've been to both of your first two meetings, as Senator Reeves has as well, and we've learned quite a lot. Some of the things that I think this peer support is really the key to success of turning people away from problem gaming. One thing I'll tell the committee that I learned is or two little things that are pretty interesting that you probably didn't realize. Unfortunately and sadly, problem gambling addiction is the number one addiction for suicide in Virginia. So that is a big issue. And number two, the good news is it is the most treatable and preventable of all the addictions. So what you're doing is even more important and critical. And I'm hoping that we can also talk a little bit about the resources that you need. But first, I'm going to open it up. I have a number of questions, but I'm going to hold on. And maybe my colleagues will ask some of the same ones, so I'll let them start. Do I have any questions from up here, from the dais? Does anybody want to ask any questions? Well, then you're going to hear from me. And you guys jump in and just wave your hands, as the chairman said, if the technology is not working. But I want to ask you a couple things, and you mentioned that the big helpline issue that you're getting is about 20% for slot machines and 18% for the skill games and 16% for sports betting. Those are the big three. Who's manning the helpline? And can you give us the phone number for the general public of the helpline, and also the tip line too? If you have that number, I think it would be great for everybody to hear that. We'll repeat it, and I'd like to see my colleagues put that on their newsletters that they send out to their constituents. I think it's very important. So, start with the helpline number, and if you don't mind.
So I am terrible at remembering phone numbers. So the one I tend to remember is the National Helpline, which works here in Virginia, and it's 1-800-GAMBLER. The lottery has one that they pay for, but, I'm in the cell phone age, and I just hit, everything's plugged in, and I hit it. So 1-800-GAMBLER, GAMBLER, is the national number, and that works here in Virginia. The tip line number for the state police, I actually have that written down, but I don't have that memorized. Sorry about that.
Okay, we'll get that number before the end of the meeting. I know my staff is out there, and they can provide that for us. But that's important, too. And I know the tip line goes to the state police, and I think they're up to 3 officers that are handling that, maybe 4 that are working in that department now. And that's a brand-new department that we've put together over the last few years. Let's talk about self-exclusion and how that's working. That one of the you have members, as you said, from all of the different gambling agencies, if you will, world, if you will. From I know there's a woman there from the Portsmouth Casino who does a great job, and I know that they have a robust exclusion setup. Tell me about what the casinos are doing, what lottery is doing, and how that seems to be working or not working in your eyes.
Okay, so I can't speak for the lottery, but what I've learned from them is there is an exclusion list that they have that works for everything. So if someone wants to be excluded from their list, they can join either by contacting them or by going through a casino or going through sports betting and do it that way. And be excluded from everything. And there were, last I had heard, there were over 800 people on that list. Then, as myself, I've also learned that in addition to that, each of the casinos tends to have their own exclusion list on top of that. So someone could exclude just from one casino. You know, if it's the Portsmouth Rivers Casino, they could exclude. So they've got additional people on top of that who have excluded, as does Hard Rock. And then I've learned that the sports betting operators have the same thing. So someone can exclude just from one sports betting operator if they would like to. So they've got their own list on top of it. So you've got one that someone can use to exclude from everything. And that goes to people who sell lottery products, casinos, sports betting. At the time it wasn't going to skill gaming, but it was going to the lottery providers. And the charitable gaming gets that list as well, although that's a little bit harder to manage in that group.
Right. So for those that don't understand exclusion, what that means is that if you feel like you have a problem or family member feels that you have a problem, you can put yourself on the exclusion list. And the list, there's usually three lists. There's a 1-year exclusion term, and then there's a 3-year, or maybe a lifetime, or a 5-year. I'm not sure. Can you?
Yeah, so it varies. There was a 2-year. There is let's see, I think it was a 2-year or 5-year and a lifetime.
Okay.
But then the casinos themselves, they said they also offer just a 1-year on if you just want to exclude from that one casino, it has varied.
Yeah, this is a really important real tool in your toolbox to help people who have problem gambling issues, because what happens is there's a time when they realize it and they put themselves on the exclusion list. And they can do it, as you say, at the casino. They can do a 1-year, but that's only for that casino. But if they want to exclude, they go to the lottery and they can be excluded for the longer periods. Once they're on that, they cannot take themselves off that. No way can they remove themselves. So it's a very strong ban. A lot of times, if you go to a casino and they ask you for ID and you're as old as I am and you're wondering, is it because I look young? No, it's not. It's because they want to make sure you're not on the exclusion list. So that's a very important tool in the toolbox for problem gambling prevention. And then you can treat those folks as well on the exclusion list. So that's important. What about how are you doing financially, and where does the money come from? Can you tell us?
Yeah, so we get money from various sources. We get 0.8% from the casinos. That would be their adjusted gross revenues. We get 2.5% from the adjusted gross revenues from sports betting. We get 0.01% from the electronic video games. That's kind of what's left over in like all the Rosies. We get let's see.
I think that's it.
Interest, well, some interest.
yeah.
And then if there's fines, we're also getting, I've not been fully able to find out what the percentage is and how it's working, but we're getting a percentage or some part of when there are fines for casinos, a portion of that. What we're estimating around 3 to maybe 3.1 million we'll be getting. Our appropriation was only at 2.3, but we are actually on par with spending over 2.5 this year. We got some approvals to go over because the need is so great.
Thank you, Ann. So regarding let's everybody on the committee, these are important numbers because there's a few groups here that are missing. One of them is is charitable gaming, and there's a bill that that Senator Reeves and I have introduced this year that will fix that, so that they will also be paying into the Problem Gambling Support Fund, and as far as the exclude, a lot of times what those fines are for situations where the exclusion has not been enforced. I think that happened early on with sports betting. I think there was a couple times where one of the vendors was not following the exclusion rule, and then they got fined like $50,000, and then you were able to. That goes to your program, which is really good. But we need to make sure that if any legal gambling would definitely pay into this. How do we stack up around as opposed to the rest of the country? Like, where do we rank in handling problem gambling and with our financial side, and also maybe in some of the amount of treatment that you've been able to do?
We're around in the middle. It's about 0.40 cents or 0.42 cents per person in Virginia, and it varies across the U.S. In some states, it's zero that they're putting into it. In other states, it's well over $1 per person. So there's one state that gets over $10 million, and then there's another state that gets like $125,000. So we've come a long way, because when we first started, we were at the bottom 3 or 4 states, and now we're close to the middle. Maybe not quite there, but almost there.
Are you running, or do you feel like you have the money right now that you need, or is there other resources do you think there would be that you could utilize? I mean, obviously everybody always says, "Oh yeah, we could handle more money," but like at the end of the year, are you running low, or are you able to help all of those people that come to you through the tip line and in other fashions?
Well, we haven't been able to put. We do need to. We're actually amending the contract now because we need to put additional monies into the contract to manage treatment and recovery services, because the need has been great. We also have not been able to offer intensive outpatient therapies because we just don't have the fund. That's a lot more expensive, and we don't have the funding for that. So there is a need, and we do need to add more money into it. We're trying to be judicious and spend the money, be as frugal as we can. But I think we're going to be close to that $3 million pretty soon.
Thank you. So that's an admonition for the General Assembly. We need to do more for problem gambling. We need to make sure that all of the gaming enterprises out there are paying into it. I mentioned the charitable gaming. We also have the Virginia Racing Commission. They're not on this list as well. So there's others. And then there's rumors that there might be more gaming coming. And so we need to make sure that we're able to handle that as well. I see Delegate Sebald has a question. Delegate?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just have one question for you. I often hear the argument that for skill games that they should be in our convenience stores because lottery tickets are also sold there. So I'm just curious, based on your expertise, do you see lottery as a major problem in addiction? Do you often work with people who, have problems who have problems as a result of lottery?
From what I've been told from the helpline data, that it's not so much the lottery. Usually people are doing lottery in addition to something else. And there are times that, yes, lottery is the scratch tickets or the doing the winning numbers do rise to the top reason as to why they're calling the helpline. But usually they're doing something else, and it's whether it's sports betting or slot machines or something, that tends to be harder to kick for a lot of people. So it used to be lottery was what was always on top. Well, that was the lead reason why people were calling the helpline. But once we brought in sports betting and casinos and everything, that flip-flopped almost within the first 12 months of it, everything being legal. So, it's lottery can cause some people issues, but it doesn't seem to have the impact that faster pace type issues do. But maybe that iLottery might have something like that. We'd have to look at the data on that.
What, Delegate Leftwich?
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So just if you could maybe tell me how underage use of skill games has been monitored, what challenges we have in enforcement, and whether you've noticed any increase in usage by these machines by underage citizens.
So we don't have the raw numbers to be able to tell you that. What we do have is through the community service boards, when they went out and did their environmental scans, they had to go into the stores and take a look. They had to go monitor where signage was and everything else. Many of them were seeing people who were most evidently, it was quite obvious they were under the age of at least 21, many under the age of 18 that they would see sitting at those skill machine games. I can't say that that's happening everywhere, but that was being visually seen across the state. In particular, the Southwest, I heard a lot of that.
Delegate Leftwich,
Follow-up question, Chairman. What, if any, mechanism is in place for enforcement?
So right now, the state police have their tip line, and they're running all the enforcement across the state. So people might call in, or they might use their form online and submit that they've seen, whether it's any type of illegal gambling, not necessarily underage gambling. And the state police then contact the local police of where it's occurring, and they decide about how they're going to work on enforcement. And from what I've been hearing across the state, every county and city seems to be doing their enforcement a little bit differently, especially around the skill games. Some started way back, and some are still kind of waiting to see what happens this session, is from what I've heard.
Thank you, Delegate.
Thank you.
Delegate Siebel. Okay, sorry. We're using the new electronic system here. So this is a big issue that Delegate Leftwich has brought up, and that is underage gambling. Do you see? Are you seeing any of the young people under 21 or even under 18 that are in need of treatment and that are coming through the tip line or through any other through the CDBG or the community? What is it? Who is it that you work with? The community service boards, the SBs?
Yes, I work with the community service boards.
Yeah.
The treatment and recovery works through the VCU contract, and they, from what I've been told, they have gotten calls around underage gambling as well, but I'm not positive. I don't know how many.
Can you tell us just quickly a little bit about the teenage brain and what you can? I mean, none of us really understand it. All of us have survived it, hopefully. But is it more problematic for gambling and with them playing and witnessing it? Does it lead to more problems later in life or even at their young age? Is that a concern of yours?
Yes. So with the teenage brain, as we know, our brains tend to not be fully developed until our mid-20s. When you start something and you're younger, whether it was smoking or drinking, doing drugs, you're more likely to have risk with it as you get older because it impacts your brain quicker because it's still learning, okay, what's this dopamine that's happening here and how is it being triggered, and you want to redo those things, and you haven't yet formed the part of your brain that is saying, okay, caution, let's take a look at what we're doing, let's try to hold back. And so, when you're younger, you have more risk-taking. People with impulse problems also are at higher risk. And it's all that age of the, especially the teenage years where you're a lot more you can get, I don't want to use the word addicted, but you can have problems quicker than you would if you had started when you were, in your late 20s or 30s or 40s, because that brain, is not fully developed to be able to control things.
Thank you. And so is normalizing gambling as would happen with these devices in every, 7-Eleven and C-store and restaurants all over Virginia? We're talking 90,000 plus machines. It's the equivalent of 13 or 14 casinos of machines, where kids and families are they are right there in the same stores. They can see these machines if they're not playing them already. Is that something that you're concerned about? Has your committee addressed that, or is it on your agenda for the future?
That is going to be on the agenda for future, I would use the term almost, so normalizing is one term, another is access and availability. If something is more accessible, more available, people are more likely to participate in it. And a lot of people think, well, they can just choose not to, but if it's right there in your face all the time, it's hard not to. I was having a conversation like this with my sister, and we were talking about something, and she goes, oh, I don't believe that. And 5 minutes later, we're in a store, and they had, you go by the checkout counter, and it was, a piece of really good chocolate or something. And she goes, oh, boy, I wish they wouldn't put that, because I just can't walk by it. I said, access and availability. You just proved my point. So, it works the same way with gambling. The more it's out there, the more it's available, the more likely people will participate, and then the more likely you can be to have a problem with it.
Thank you, Ann. Do we have any final questions or any comments from the committee? Anybody? All right, well, we really appreciate your presentation and all the hard work you're doing, and we're going to try to get you some more resources, I hope, and I hope to try to also attend that next meeting so I can keep my unblemished record going and learning a lot.
It's virtual.
Is it virtual? Okay, good. That'll make it easier.
Thank you
very much. And is Chief Kirby here now? We can start the ABC presentation, or yeah, there he is. Thank
Good afternoon, Delegate Krizik.
So, as you weren't here earlier, so that's why we saved you till last, and I hope we gave you a little bit of time. I know the elevators in this building are a little slower than there's as many elevators as we have. You'd think they'd be faster, but I do want to also again apologize to you because I had asked you to come up with this big fancy PowerPoint presentation all about the history of the ABC. And some of my committee members weren't that keen on that 2-hour presentation. And so I've asked you here just to maybe answer some questions about ABC so we can get prepared. We've got a lot of interesting bills coming forward. There's one about ice cream infused, alcohol infused ice cream or whatever. So there's some, if anybody's got some questions, now's a good time to do it before we get to the actual bills, perhaps, and some of the other things that you're doing with enforcement. I know that's been an issue. So I'll open it up to the committee for any questions, unless you would you like to say a few words first?
Thank you, Delegate Krizik, Chair. I just identify myself. I'm Tom Kirby. I'm normally the Chief of Law Enforcement for Virginia ABC. I'm currently serving as the interim CEO role, and I'm very proud of the work that Virginia ABC does, and I'm thankful for the committee's time today to come before you, and I'll be hopefully able to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Chief. Yes, so you are the interim CEO right now of Virginia ABC.
Yes, sir.
Correct. Okay, anybody I'm looking at my little iPad here, and no one's asking questions. We have a very shy committee, apparently. The Delegate Knight's not too shy. And
if you don't mind, if you could give us a broad overview to tell us what the gross amount of sales are, and then how much money returns back, because I certainly know you have profit and you have taxes on that. If you could tell us that, kind of tell us the trend line, because I know we've had year-over-year profits forever, but during COVID, they spiked. So we know we're going to have a correction on that spike, but just give us a general overview on that spike and the gross revenues and how much profit and taxes goes back to the Commonwealth.
Yes, sir, Delegate Knight. So for this particular budget that we're in currently, we were forecasting approximately $244.3 million in profit to be returned back to the General Assembly. That was the budget that was approved by the board. And that is a significant increase than our previous years that we've had. And we are trying to approach looking at our revenue, and to get to that 244.3, we had assumed a 5.2% growth in revenue, which is essentially increase in sales, perhaps slight inflation, meaning that suppliers might increase profit there for themselves, which would also increase profit at Virginia ABC. But what we're realizing is across the market nationally is that we're really seeing probably closer to about a 2% growth in alcoholic beverage sales. We're monitoring, as you know, Virginia has a control system, which essentially Virginia is responsible for the wholesaling and the retailing of alcohol. We do that through 400 Virginia-owned ABC stores. But we're also watching the open market. And nationally, in both open and controlled markets, we're seeing that growth rate closer to about 2%. And that's where Virginia ABC right now is setting in its revenue growth for the year. So we certainly are growing. We are growing slightly less than what our forecasted budget is, and that we're growing right around 2%. We have done a number of initiatives over the holiday seasons to see if there was anything that we could do to change or generate additional revenue. We will continue to do that as we move forward. The focus that I have asked my team back at ABC to focus on are three things. And one is to responsibly retail alcohol, also responsibly distribute it, so get it out of that distribution center and get it into the retail stores, but not just sell blindly, sell responsibly, but we are in the business to generate revenue for the Commonwealth so that you all, the policymakers and the administration, can do great things with that revenue. So we are true to that. And then, of course, the piece that I'm most familiar with, and that's the regulating of alcohol. And those are the three things we focus on: retail and distributing responsibly, and then also on the regulating of alcohol. Overall, you're looking at about a $1.5 billion business here at Virginia ABC, and that goes to what Delegate Knight was talking about. And then that profit has been north of $200+ million for a number of years. And again, this year was forecasted at $244.3 million.
Thank you. That's great that you have those up right there on without you don't have any notes or anything. That's impressive. So you've done what kind of? Can you tell us a little bit about maybe some of the things that you've tried to do over the last few months to I won't say it, gin up your sales?
Chairman Krizik, that's a takeaway for me, and perhaps I'll work that into a future marketing campaign. We ran a number of promotions over the holiday period of time, doing flash sales where we had certain products that were discounted by 20%. We did other sales that were doorbuster sales, again, similar in a discount type program. We did a number of allocated product. As you're aware, there are a number of products that Virginia ABC carries, especially in the category of bourbon, that are highly sought after. We did a number of allocated drops on Saturdays where we would drop cases upon cases of bourbon across the Commonwealth. So we try to make it available to everybody. So we try to ensure every store gets some of the allocated product. We announce it in advance so that everyone has an opportunity to get out to that store and buy. And that's very different than what you see in other places that don't have control stores. You might find that product available, but it might be 6 times the suggested manufacturer's retail price. So that's a benefit of having a control market is that we try to bring it to market at a suggested retail price and make it available for all the citizens of Virginia that want to have that product. So we did those allocated drops. We actually extended store hours just during the month of December. We were very calculated in that, and we did reach out to even some legislative members. We reached out to the administration just to make sure that if there were concerns out there that we were hearing what those concerns were, and we extended hours of stores in hopes of being open when customers wanted us to be open so they come in and purchase those products. And then we also upped our stock in the stores a little bit. We felt like it was important to make sure that we didn't run out of anything, so we worked our distribution team just a little bit harder during those times, set some new records of getting out maybe like 41,000 cases a day out of the distribution center, which again is an investment that this General Assembly made in Virginia ABC and allowing us to build a new headquarters and build a new distribution center. We're still working on leveraging that technology. There's a lot of automation. I will offer, if any of you all, even in the off season, if there is such a thing, if you all have that opportunity, I know a number of you have come out there to look at that. It is something to see that automation and just to see, spirits as tall as you can see stacked up. And then when it gets on that conveyor belt, which I think is about 4 miles of conveyor belt, and to see it being moved around and the automation and it running down in the bottom of the trucks is something to see. So I invite all of you all to partake in that if you get an opportunity to.
Yeah, I would second that everybody on the committee should take time to go and visit that's a very impressive warehouse, and it is automated. What about some of the new significant challenges that you may have had, like we here at the General Assembly? I mentioned the ice cream with alcohol is one possibility. What about the cocktails to go? I know that has been a challenge too. How have you been able to handle that and the enforcement process of that? How's that going?
So I think the way Virginia ABC approaches all of the different items that you all will see to come before you is that we stay very connected to our restaurant community. We stay connected to our stakeholder community. You all know in Virginia we have a 3-tier system, which essentially means we have the manufacturing tier, the distribution wholesale tier, and then the retail tier. We stay very connected to the stakeholders in each of those groups to try to understand what is the market asking for, because while we're responsible for regulating it and enforcing it, we also have to be respectful of where the industry may be going. For example, cocktails to go is one of those items that came out of COVID. Remember, during COVID, our businesses were essentially shut down, at least for on-premise occupancy. Virginia ABC worked with the stakeholders and policymakers to allow for cocktails to go during the COVID time. It is something that came up under a sunset clause and was allowed for 2 years. That sunset clause is going to expire this time. Virginia ABC conducted a study in the off-season here, and part of that study incorporated us going out and placing orders and having alcohol attempted to be delivered to one of our underage buyers. We heard in our earlier presentation, we talked about skill gaming. Virginia ABC is responsible for checking alcohol compliance for underage access, and we do that through underage buyer operations. That's where we send out an underage kid with a couple of our agents, and they attempt to purchase. It's very different in the cocktails to go or the delivery market, because remember, delivery doesn't just include cocktails to go, but it also includes wine and beer to go. And it's much more labor intensive because you can't just order up a 6-pack of beer and have it dropped off at some point in time in the future at the child's home, because we have to be there to observe that action. So we have to set up these operations. We're one of the only few states across the country actually doing delivery type operations, where we will have a location and we will order from multiple vendors and attempt to have that product delivered in. We have found the compliance rate for delivery of alcohol to be less than that of our brick and mortar retailers, both on-premise and off-premise. The compliance rate is less. So based on that, I think Virginia ABC does say we just need to be cautious, not that we should discontinue that opportunity for our licensees. We just think we need to still continue to provide additional education and additional time and experience for everyone to get used to checking IDs and making sure they're not putting that alcohol in the hands of an underage person. Because again, we are seeing that to be slightly higher non-compliance than what we see in our brick and mortar locations.
Yeah, that's really important to this committee. I know, speaking for my colleagues, that underage drinking is something that we consider something that needs to be enforced very rigorously and strenuously, and hopefully, and it sounds to me like you're on top of that. Delegate Price has a question.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I think my question is kind of aligned to that when on New Year's Eve, I think around that time, there were programs that were offering free rides and things of that nature, but they're really around different holidays. So in reading more information about that, there was a significant chunk of underage deaths, vehicular deaths and traffic deaths that were attributed to alcohol. So what other agencies do you all work with? So I understand the underage buyer operations, love the fact that you are doing the delivery options. What are some of the other things that we have in place? And if it's not you, who are some of those partners that you're working with as well?
So Virginia ABC has an education and prevention, and we recently changed that name to community and health. Where we are actually engaged in a number of events throughout the year that reaches out to institutions of higher education. We have a coalition there where we work with colleges across the Commonwealth, and that's not just on alcohol, but it's on substance abuse in general. But obviously our forte is alcohol, so there's a lot of emphasis there on alcohol. We do a program in the summertime where we bring in youth leaders from various either community groups or school programs across the Commonwealth to a program which most recently been held in Longwood University. It's called YADAP. And it's essentially giving those youth leaders the skills to go back into their schools and educate about the dangers of substance abuse, alcohol abuse. So there's a lot of different programs that Virginia ABC does to try to educate about alcohol. On our licensee side, on our training side, we do two different programs. One is called RSVP, which is for servers, responsible servers, and then the other one is MART, and that's for managers. And that's where we educate our retail licensees about proper serving of alcohol, not just to underage, but also to maybe someone who's intoxicated or someone that's not supposed to have alcohol. So we provide that types of training, and both from a server and a manager standpoint. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate Price. That's very important. I know you talked about how much money you're earning the Commonwealth, and that's all to the good, and it's important. But certainly the public safety aspect of what you do is more important. I would rather you not make a single penny and protect the public in as much as possible. So I think that's important. So thank you for that. Let me ask you about the skill game issue, because you, once upon a time for a year there, you were regulating that. Can you tell us what that entailed when you were in charge of the skill games?
Yes, Delegate Krizik. Virginia ABC, back during COVID, was asked, and I think it was a very short window. I want to say maybe we were asked sometime around April with the expectation that something would be effective July 1. We were essentially asked to create a program, and regulate can mean a lot of different things. You've kind of heard me talk about regulating and enforcing alcohol, and there is a lot there, from education to, doing underage buyer compliance checks, to going out and investigating establishments when they are a public safety to the community that they serve. That's not necessarily the same type of regulation when we speak about skill games. We were essentially asked to create a structure where we could allow for skill game, operators or distributors to be registered in Virginia. We were asked to create a program where we could ensure that if the machines were in play, that the proper tax was being collected on those machines. We did work with the Department of Taxation on the collection of that tax. We worked with the distributors and the operators on creating reports that they had to submit to Virginia ABC. And essentially what Virginia ABC did was register, and I think it was just under 100 operators or distributors that represented about 10,000 machines. Those machines weren't always in play. I would have to have my notes to know exactly how many, but I would guesstimate, somewhere maybe around 7,000 a month were actually in play. The rest of them might have been in storage or being moved in and out of play. And essentially what we did for that 12-month period of time is register those operators. We ensured that they were properly registered. We developed a label and a tracking system that was all done on paper. And if you see any of those machines that are still in existence, it's a very large yellow label, and it had the location and all. And essentially, we had rules. If that distributor wanted to move that machine to a different location, there was a process they had to go through in order to do that. And I believe that was responsible for about $137 million in revenue that went to the COVID relief fund. And Virginia ABC oversaw that process for a temporary period of time. Towards the end of the year period, we were asked by a number of legislators in reference to places that had popped up that were what I would call illegal places that were not licensed by Virginia ABC. They were not even Virginia ABC licensed establishments that had skill games in there. So towards the end of the program, we started sending our agents out to these locations and essentially issue some cease and desist letters when appropriate to try to gain compliance there of these illegal establishments that had machines that were not licensed by Virginia ABC, that we were not collecting a tax on, to try to curtail that type of activity. That's one of the functions that we did. Wasn't maybe in the initial ask, but something that developed towards the end of the program. And then at the conclusion of that year, we wrapped up the licensing and tracking and collection of the funds for that incident. During that period of time, if we did have a situation where maybe we had a machine that had been moved improperly or a machine that wasn't, they weren't paying the proper tax on, we had the ability to leverage a civil penalty against them, and we did take some of those actions over the course of the year as well.
Did you ever have to check identification, make sure that those skill games were not being played by young underage people like you do with alcohol being?
We did not conduct those type of operations, Delegate Krizik. There was a requirement, and I believe it was 18 for that particular year. It could have been 21. There was a requirement that only those individuals that are of that age that played, but Virginia ABC did not go out and conduct underage compliant checks operations like we do for alcohol. We actually do tobacco operations also. That's not a primary responsibility of us, but we do help out DBHDS by doing some of those checks. But we did not do any of those checks, sir, for gaming, skill games.
May I ask, why didn't you do those checks?
I think, for the year temporary program, it was the capacity that Virginia ABC had was to get those. First of all, we had to develop regulations, get those regulations implemented. We had to develop the program all in a matter of months, get the machines registered. The machines were being moved on a regular basis. There was a capacity issue there. We did have our agents going out inspecting the locations to make sure they had the required number of machines there, making sure that they had not moved the machine, that all the machines were properly registered, they were properly decaled. I mean, we were doing that aspect of it, but I would say that I think if we weren't doing the underage buyer, it was more of a capacity issue. So,
to that issue of capacity that you just mentioned, that was 10,000 machines and an income of $170 million based on a $1,200 per month per machine tax, if you will. The capacity now, how would you handle, and have you looked at the bills that are making their way through the General Assembly now, and how would you handle 90,000 plus machines? Is your capacity sufficient now to handle that starting in July?
I think that whatever, assuming that skill games are approved, so I think one of your questions was, have I looked at the bill? I've looked at the Senate version of the bill, and we have had some initial conversations internally. I think the difference that I see today versus before is that we were asked essentially to focus on registering and collecting the taxes on these skill games for a 12-month period of time, a very temporary point in time. The current legislation is out there, doesn't have, a definitive time at being over. Of course, we've learned a lot more about skill games than what we knew when we were asked to step in and regulate these for the Commonwealth. And again, I have to emphasize, regulate is a pretty strong word when you think about what we normally regulate and how we normally regulate it. The first time we did this was more of a registration, verification, inspect the machines as far as making sure that the machine was where it was supposed to be and it hadn't moved and there wasn't an unauthorized machine there.
Would it be
We
fair?
were not.
Sorry, excuse me. I'm sorry to interrupt you. Would it be fair to say, so you make a very good point, right, that you weren't really regulating machines, you were registering them. It was a much less robust process, and that to regulate them, you would have to include that kind of registration process in the future. So now what you may be asked to do if this bill were to pass, for example, you would be asked to not only register and everything, but do the kind of regulations that we talk about, like doing checks to make sure underage people are not playing these games and collecting money or losing money. We're also talking about not 10,000 machines, but upwards of 90,000 machines. So you had a capacity issue back then, and yes, you've learned a little bit. You've learned more than most. But aren't you a little concerned about taking that on come July 1?
Yes, sir, Delegate Krizik. The focus of Virginia ABC has, and I hope it remains, to be the regulation and the enforcement of alcoholic beverage laws, in addition to our responsibility around retailing and distributing alcohol. We would need additional resources in order to regulate skill games. We would also need to learn and adapt a technology-based program. And again, we've been aware of this bill a very short period of time. John Daniel, who is obviously instrumental to anything that we do here at Virginia ABC, would be able to tell me the exact number of days that we've had it. But I would say it's probably less than a week or so, if it's that. What we have learned in that period of time is that we would have to have proper software. We can't register 90,000 machines if that's the correct number of machines. I don't know what the number of machines are. That's one of the difficulties in trying to come up with a program to register regulate the machines, is I can't tell you really what the scope of the marketplace looks like. I would say that's more than 10,000 because I know what 10,000 look like in the marketplace, and it looks like there's more machines out there than 10,000 machines, but I don't have a definitive number as to what that looks like. I could probably take the number of licenses that Virginia ABC has, the number of retail licenses, because you have to have that in order to get skill games. I think you could have 5 machines in a regular ABC licensed establishment. You have up to 10 machines inside a truck stop. So I think Virginia ABC probably has somewhere around 19,000 retail licensees, and if all of them had 5 machines, I guess that gets you pretty close to 100,000 machines. 90,000 machines. Maybe that's how the math was developed.
Yeah, that was my back of the envelope calculation. Yeah.
Yep.
Same.
So I think we also did not validate the information that was reported to us each month. It was not something that we were asked to do by the law or by any of the regulation. And that's essentially validating the wagers and the payouts, validating the software, having the software certified by independent labs. Some of that language is required in the new bill. We have had some very, very preliminary conversations with some technology type companies that do this because we do recognize that we would not be able to regulate the machines the way we did for a 12-month period of time in order to deliver what appears to be the Commonwealth's desire, if it decides to pass this policy, of having regulated machines similar to other gaming machines that are regulated in the Commonwealth of Virginia.
So it's safe to say that this is a huge policy change for Virginia, and that would be a big lift for you.
It would be a significant lift for Virginia ABC to attempt to regulate these games going forward.
Thank you. And I just want to say thank you for all the hard work that you do and that Virginia ABC does. Being an independent agency, of course, allowed you to be nimble that time and be able to get that from April to July and stand that up. And I think everybody can recognize that that was tough work and you did it quickly. We really appreciate that. But now we have we may have this issue ahead of us. We'll see how this all plays out. But I just want to make sure that your agency is the correct place to do this if it comes to it. But we'll see how there's a long way to go. Thank you and do we have any other further questions? Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Chief Kirby, very much. And, no, we don't have any. You guys are all good? All right, before we, thank you very much. We appreciate it. I've got one last announcement. I promised that I would give you the problem helpline for problem gambling for the public, especially that's watching. It's 1-888-532-3500. And for illegal gaming tip line, it is 1-833-889-2300. Yep, the problem helpline is 1-888-532-3500. And the illegal gaming tip line that goes to state police is 1-833-889-2300. Delegate Leftwich.
Mr. Chairman, I just want to say that I'm very impressed with the cordial spirit in which you've conducted this meeting.
Thank you. I hope I will maintain that cordiality throughout the session. Thank you, everybody. Do we have a motion to adjourn until it's okay? We have Delegate Price has moved it, and Delegate Bennett Parker has seconded it. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All right. No? Okay. The ayes have it. We are going to adjourn. Thank you very much.